I thought it might be fun to show you how you could potentially build the wooden part of a bow for one of your longbow projects with some relatively simple hand tools. And I haven't done this before, but the work through should be pretty similar to other things. So I have a little piece of scrap wood. This one's a little bit too thin for what you would use, but it's just a scrap that I'm going to use for a quick little practice move. I have already scratched out a bit of a design that I'm going to try and cut out and use on this. I'm going to use a Japanese style saw to make some cuts, a relatively cheap chisel. This one is wider than I need it to be. Should make it easy to make some clean cuts. And a mallet for the chisel. And there's one step I'm going to use a jack plane for, but probably don't actually need a jack plane for any of it, depending on the wood you get and depending on how good the saw cuts are. So first, to kind of show how easy this can be, I'm going to sharpen my tools because it should be relatively quick and easy to get through this stuff. Ideally, it's always going to be relatively quick and easy, and so I want to demonstrate. I'm going to sharpen the plane iron and the chisel. I have some stones. These are already fairly sharp, so I'm just going to touch them up. I'm not going to use all. I have coarse, medium, fine. Actually, I think it's more like a coarse, fine, and super fine. And so I'm only going to touch these up. So I'm not going to use the coarse today. I just have it up because it always rests with the other ones. Give them a touch of water. And put my chisel on here with the bevel towards me. I'm going to estimate about a 25 to 30 degree angle. Let's see if I made a burr. I did, so that's already ready. I'm going to knock my burr down. That should be good. Give this a quick wipe to get any grit off. Move on to my superfine, which now has, of course, sawdust on it. I'm going to estimate the same type of angle. Good, it's got a little burr. That should be it for the chisel. Do exactly the same thing with the plane iron, which is much like a chisel. One of the only differences is the plane iron should have slightly softened corners. The chisel should have very crisp, sharp corners. So estimate the same. Let me see how sharp this is. Same 25 to. Oh, that needs more. So your little lift at the end there, just to soften the corners a bit, so hopefully it gouges slightly less when I use it. Much like sharpening a knife, all I'm looking for is to raise a little burr. If I go off the edges of these stones, it doesn't really matter as long as the average swipe gets the whole blade. And I could probably use more, but that should be good enough for today. It might not be enough, but I'm not going to worry about it today. Okay, so I'm going to just set my stones aside and I'll give them a bit better of a cleaning after I'm done filming. Much like a good knife, you should strap these to polish these edges up. This is just a cheap board with a scrap of suede stuck to it and some polishing compound on there. It's kind of old and the suede's flaking off, but it still seems to work okay. Oh yeah, let's see here. Just get sharp enough. Yeah, this could be sharper, but it's cutting hair, so this is definitely good enough for what we need today. There we go. Nice. So now, several minutes of work that will definitely pay dividends later. And somehow that got totally undone. That's bad. How did I get? Yeah. If you eventually get a hand plane, there's plenty of videos online that show you how to take them apart and put them together and tune them up and get them all set the way that you need. And it's, generally speaking, really easy to do all this. All right, so that will be ready for later. Okay, so first I'm going to cut out. So this is the face that I'm going to show to you. So I'm going to, is that the face? Yeah. So sorry, there's one small mistake on here. Let me rectify real quick. I have the wrong line. I cut mine on the side. I want it, but not there. So I'm going to cut this top piece off here quickly. And then I'm just going to show the one side real quick, how you might shape that one out. So first, I'm going to cut from the top down to this line over here and go a little bit past it. This cut doesn't need to be perfect, of course. We want it to be as good as possible. So I'm going to go a little bit outside. Like actually, I guess on your side, it's right on the line. And with a nice sharp saw, shouldn't take any time at all. Glance over. I'm going to go a little past. So I'm done with that for now. I'm going to come in with a chisel and a soft face mount. I'm just going to try and chip this whole block out in one go. So I'm going to come in here, bevel up a decent amount of space below that line. Try to just pop this whole thing out. There we go. So I'm glad I went so low. There must be a knot in the wood. It jumped up. That doesn't matter for what I need. So now, yeah, let's go ahead and we'll use this side. That's a little bit more attractive. So now I'm going to plane the bottom to get that kind of flat. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I just want it to be close-ish to that line. And another I did mention earlier, among the tools I'm using, of course, is the vise. The vise is arguably the most important tool. Being able to hold the work is key. So I'm going to take some deep cuts right off the bat to get started here. Good, that's not going. There we go. Hand planes are very good at smooth straight cuts. Not very good, not a regular hand plane like this, a jack plane, not very good at making things curved. But it will give us a nice flat bottom. So that's all we're doing with the hand plane today. That bottom doesn't need to be that crisp and even, but it's nice to have it sort of close. So now we're going to come over and we just show you on the one side. I'm going to see if I can do this with a chisel. And in fact, actually, let's do the two sides two different ways. I bet I'm going to come on this side because I'm going to hold the hammer. My dominant hand is on this side, so I like to hit the chisel this way. I'm going to chop some of this out just to show how you can do it. So we come in here, bevel up. I'm also going to put gloves on because it's cold. I don't want to get one of my fingers. Come in here, bevel up, close-ish to the corner. Let less than a 45-degree angle and just pop chunks out. Back up, same thing. Moving a little bit, center of that device. I want to try to remove the material, but I don't want to do too much at once because I don't want it getting away from me. So I can just sort of chop in like this, but I want to keep going until I come all the way out the side. Take a little more here. Start the cut, shallow it out, finish the cut so I don't go down too deep. Now, because this is sort of an inside curve, I'm going to come in and go bevel down, and I should be able to do a better job. I have to have a much steeper attack angle with the chisel, but now I can angle the chisel around. I can follow that curve. I want to be careful when I'm coming out because I don't want to dink the chisel hard into my vise because a bunch of my vise is steel. It will fuck the chisel up. So this is not hard to do, but it does take some practice to get to the point where you can do this kind of thing sort of easily and consistently. But as you can see, we're already, this is a thin piece, right? So it'll be harder on a thicker piece, but we're already most of the way there. And then now if I want to, I can actually come in carefully with no hammer and do some fine work and add a bit of a curve on there if I feel like it. And sort of refine this shape. So this is a pretty good amount of work for just a couple of minutes. So now a safer and slower way of doing the same kind of thing is going to be to chip out chunks that I have stop cuts put in there. So I'm going to come in on this side. I'm going to put nicks going down most of the way to our line. And then I'm going to knock those out one at a time using the chisel. It's a good way to kind of safely remove the spot. So you want to cut most of the way, but not all the way to that line. And this is particularly useful if you have grain in the wood that's not very straight. This is a good way to correct for things like that. So now I can come in and knock these pieces out. And what I want to do is when I'm chiseling in from this side, I want to make sure that the height of the chisel is at least as high as the notch on this side. I don't want to go below the notch, because if I go below the notch, it might split all the way across like when we took the board out in the first place. So I'm going to come in here, bevel up about, I'm going to find how high that line, how high that notch is, and come just above that notch and give this little gentle pop. It comes right out. Same thing, I'm going to come in here and go a little bit above, gentle pop. Same thing here, come a little bit above, and here. So there, so now, you can even get a little more, I think. Oh yeah, so that pop, that cracked, it didn't come out. Nice. Let me give this one more, it gives a little upward angle. There we go. There, so now, we've taken a bunch of the waste wood out. We can come in with a chisel. We don't want to chisel this way because we'll split it across like we did when we removed the entire piece. But now we can come in this way and chisel this down. This is going to be a little challenging for me because it's the wrong hand, but it is somewhat safer to do this now. You're less likely to have a blowout. You can get a little closer to the line, but you should always go outside of the line. And then now, if I want to, I can come in like I did with the other one, bevel down, and do some sort of curved cuts and scalloping, then I can come in and fix that up. Another tool that I forgot to break out, it's really useful sort of thing, is the rasp. And this is the Shinto style rasp that's made out of like hacksaw blades stuck together. It has a coarse side and a fine side. And if you want to, we can come along with the coarse side and do some real quick shaping, being kind of gentle so we have a bit less blowout. Then we can come along with the fine side, give that just a hair, and then now I'm going to give myself some clearance. And this tool is fantastic for putting these curves in. You shouldn't really go top down like this. The wood's going to blow out. But if I do it on this side, you can't really see it. But you should, instead of going down into the wood, you go up out of the wood, and it's much less likely to chip. This is working very nicely, but that rasp is kind of biting into the wood. But let me see if I can give you a quick. Man, this rasp is sharp. Okay. So this will need quite a bit more work, but considering how much time we've spent on this now, especially this side, we have most of the curve put in, and we've already started kind of rounding it over pretty well. I was not being very careful, but you can see it's still pretty, we're doing pretty good here. And then coming over on this side, if I work on that with the rasp, I can basically make those things match in no time. So over to my fine side, doing a sort of sweeping move to kind of blend everything together, kind of over the top. And get the corner around it over. If you arc your moves and blend your moves, you won't end up with as many kind of like cut lines. It doesn't look like you hit it with a saw or a chisel when you rasp it around. There we go. Okay. So that needs a lot more work, but here we are, less than 10 minutes in. Already got the general shape. Obviously need to match up these curves, but that would be pretty straightforward to do. And especially if this was a thicker piece, it would actually make that slightly easier to do because they would not cut quite so quickly. This one cut down a little more easily than I would have liked to. Plus, I think this wood might be a little bit softer than you would use for a bow anyway, so the harder wood will be a little bit more difficult to cut, but will also be a little bit more resilient, and so you will not overcut it quite as easily as I did in some, like cutting this corner down and cutting this scallop out. But hopefully it gives you an idea of like relatively nice things that you can do with relatively simple hand tools. Rasp, nice sharp chisel, relatively inexpensive, nice sharp saw, and if you feel like it, a bench plane. Although for projects like this, bench planes aren't really all that important because they do a good job of making things flat, and we're not as worried about making things flat with something that's this curved. And for the bottom, if you really wanted to, you could make that flat by taking a piece of sandpaper and putting it on a flat surface and flattening the bottom across that. It would just take longer than it would with the hand plane, but would work just as well at the end of the day. All right, I hope that was helpful.